Welcome to another episode of Jamming with Jason. Today, I have a special treat for you. I'm talking to Richard Chambers, who is the former president and CEO of the Institute of Internal Auditors. Somebody I'm probably sure that you're already pretty familiar with, but we might go down some paths today that you might not be expecting. So whatever you do, make sure that you listen to the whole episode, and you're going to find a lot of value from what Richard is going to share today. So whatever you do, listen to the whole episode. When you get value, share this with someone else because they will also get value. And with that, we're going to roll the episode with Richard.
Hey, Jason.
Hi, I'm Jason Mefford, and you're in the right place to start transforming your career and life with this podcast. I've been in the trenches as an executive leader, and now I'm an executive coach and confidential advisor to executives all over the world. I use a multidisciplinary approach to improve learning that drives transformation by getting to the root cause in a practical, no-nonsense way. I love learning and sharing what makes people tick. You get both education and entertainment, since learning shouldn't be boring, right? But that's enough about me. This podcast is a combination of intuitive leadership, neural influence, and mental mastery to take your career and life to levels you've never thought possible. If you're wanting to improve yourself, develop stronger relationships professionally and personally, make quicker, better decisions, and become a more effective leader, then of course, this podcast is for you because you are going to learn how to manage emotions in yourself and others, avoid burnout, stress, and anxiety, master your mind, get people to listen and take action, and become a lifelong learner. And when you do that, you will have a positive mental attitude, executive leadership presence, and the skills to know exactly what to say and do in any situation. I'm glad you're here. So, let's get started.
Hey, Jason, how are you? It's great to be with you.
I'm good. How are you, Richard?
Good.
It's good to be with you. You know, we've obviously, connected at different times in our career with IIA, with other stuff like that, and it's a great opportunity. I know you've kind of stepped down from the role there at the IIA, and so I know one of the questions people are probably asking is, what's Richard doing now, right? So maybe let's just start off, because you're not really retired. But if you're like most people I know that quote unquote retire, you're busier now than you were when you were working full time. So first off, maybe just get started. Let people know what you're doing now, because I know you've got some pretty exciting roles that you've taken on as well here.
Well, thanks. Thanks again for inviting me on and for giving me the opportunity to talk a little bit about what's going on. Yeah, I think a lot of people out there probably do know that I didn't disappear on the 31st of March. When I announced last summer that I was going to step down this year in March, people started to say, "Oh, Richard's retiring. This is the end." Going off into retirement, and I had to correct people, and the way I would do it is to say, I said I'm stepping down. I'm not lying down. So I don't plan to, just go into restful bliss. I plan to stay active, and that's exactly what I'm doing. Announced very soon after I stepped down from the IA that I was joining the board of SWAP Internal Audit Services out of the UK. It's a public-private partnership that does internal audit, co-sourcing, outsourcing primarily for public sector organizations in the UK. So I'm their first non-executive director. That's exciting. And then, of course, the bigger news in some ways was the announcement at the beginning of May that I am going to join the audit board as their senior internal audit advisor. And in that capacity, really get to do a lot of the things that I loved about being at the IIA, continuing to be a champion for this profession, getting out there and speaking out on behalf of internal auditors and hopefully providing some advice and wisdom along the way. You know, I've coming up on 46 years in internal audit. I was telling somebody the other day, I joined the internal audit profession about 15 months after I ended my teenage years. Believe it or not, 15 months before I was an internal auditor, I was a teenager. So, you know, I've been pretty consistent, at least, in staying with the same profession for over 4.5 decades. But you know, it's an opportunity in the new life to continue to impart my insights and my experiences, and hopefully help somebody out around the world.
Yeah, which is great. You know, I love that what you said. You know, I'm stepping down. I'm not lying down, right? And I think I'm kind of that way. My wife always kids me that I'm never going to retire. I'm going to keep doing something until I do lie down in the grave. And you know, I can always tell. I mean, there's been other people that I've had on too. You know, like a Larry Harrington and you know Steve Gephardt and some of these people too that are continuing to still kind of give back as well. And you're doing the same thing, right? You want to keep giving to a profession that served you very well. You've served it very well for 46 years. So we appreciate having you here, and I appreciate having you on today so we can talk. You know, and you know, there's a lot of things. I mean, in 46 years, you know, again, that's longer than a lot of people listening to this have been alive, right?
Absolutely.
And I haven't been in the profession as long as you, but we've both been in the profession long enough that we've seen some pretty dramatic changes, I think, as well, right? So it's, you know, I'm kind of interested, you know, the last book that you did, Agents of Change, Internal Auditors in an Era of Disruption.
Yes.
Which I think is a great topic as well, and maybe something that we can talk a little bit about, because like you said, not your first rodeo. You've been here for a while. You've been watching things change. So where are we kind of going as a profession, and how can we be this agent of change as we go forward? Because obviously there's been disruption. We've had a lot of disruption this last year. Where can we expect internal auditing to go, and how can people start preparing for that?
Well, it's a great question, Jason. And you know, in the book, we actually took and first of all, I was very grateful to the Internal Audit Foundation for allowing me to pen yet another book. Partnered with my longtime collaborator Robert Perez, who helped me along the way with some blogs and other writing opportunities. I felt like he could almost speak in my voice better than me. So we really took the opportunity in the book to make the case for why internal audit should continue to evolve. And the reality is it's a relatively young profession on the world stage. It's only been around for maybe 150 years at the most, but probably more like 100. Mm-hmm. And it has been in a constant state of evolution since its inception. And in many ways for the better. I think we're a much stronger, a much more valuable profession today than we were even 10 years ago or 20 years ago. So we make the case in the book that internal audit's always been in an evolutionary state. When we started, we were more the hindsight guys looking behind, primarily focused on controls over financial reporting. We were the green eye shade voucher examiners of the early 20th century. And then along the way, I think we began to become more enlightened about the value that we could bring if we look at operations and operational controls. And that's sort of brought about what I call the era of insight, where we're speaking more contemporaneously, not just always looking behind. And to me, the natural flow and evolution for this profession is to move to a stage or a state in the future where we're also able to look forward. You don't drive a car by simply looking behind or looking to your right or left. You have to keep your eye on the road ahead. And I think that's where, as internal auditors, we probably have the most value to add in the coming decade and beyond.
Yeah, and because like you said, I mean, and there's still, I mean, every internal audit function is a little bit different. Some are more evolved, some more mature. I mean, some people use maturity models to kind of describe. I know in the last Sawyer's, that I helped write, there was kind of a part in there about the 5 generations of internal auditing, and about kind of moving into some of this more foresight kind of related stuff.
Right.
There's some people that still do have their heads down. They're still very historical in nature, which for some organizations maybe that's what they need. But like you said, we need to start moving from historical to this insight to this foresight. And it's always interesting, because I've done a lot in the risk management space as well. And usually, again, we tend to be in the details. We tend to be looking at historical data, but how do we transition to having more of that foresight? Because it's a different skill. And it's almost like we have to view the world differently. And sometimes we have to view the world differently than how we've been trained for the last 20 or 30 years in our profession. So what are you seeing, leaders that are moving to that foresight? What are they doing different that other people can learn from?
Well, first of all, I think it's important to note that I'm not suggesting that we take the place of management in terms of assessing risks and thinking about future risks. I think the value of having internal audit as yet another set of eyes on the risks of an organization is, given how volatile and the velocity of risk in the 21st century, I don't think you can have too many eyes looking at it simultaneously. I think where we can add the most value is not predicting what's going to happen to the company in 3 years or 5 years, but really looking either management has an adequate risk management plan so that they've got their eye on the future. And if we're seeing things that could potentially present risks that they're missing, then I think that's an opportunity for us to add value to them and potentially to the board if management is not inclined to be receptive to any insights that we may bring. So the chief audit executives that I think are doing the best work around the foresight piece. First of all, you don't stop the hindsight or the insight. I mean, it's a continuum, and I would say there's always going to be value in being able to identify mistakes that have been made or things that are not being done correctly or appropriately now. But I think increasingly the risk that organizations face isn't what they can see immediately in front of them. It's what lies further ahead. I think probably some of your listeners have heard me talk about this. I live here on the Atlantic Ocean, just not far south of Daytona Beach and just a little bit north of Kennedy Space Center. I live right on the ocean, and I can walk out there. This week was the first week of hurricane season. I can walk out there on the beach behind my house any day of the week, and the skies are blue and the sea is calm, and I can assume that I have nothing to fear being a beachside resident. Meanwhile, as we move deeper into the summer, in all likelihood, there's one or more fierce Category 3 to 5 hurricanes churning somewhere out there in the Atlantic, potentially heading this direction. I won't see them. I won't even see the clouds from them or the rising tides until a day or so before. And so if I'm content to simply use the most basic and crude form of risk assessment, that is going up to the hilltop and looking out there, I'm probably going to find myself surprised more often than not. So I think as internal auditors, we got to become a little bit more like, meteorologists and other scientists who are trying to look further ahead, so that we're not that we're not leaving our organizations, our companies, our boards, our management in a vulnerable place by not helping them look far enough out onto the horizon.
Well, I think it's a great example that we can kind of go into a little bit more, because hurricanes are one of those natural disaster things that you can foresee coming. I'm here in California. you can't predict an earthquake. It just happens, right?
Yep.
I mean, you can kind of tell based on some of the little tremors that are happening that maybe something bigger is going to happen, but we don't actually know until it's here, because that's a very quick velocity event. Hurricanes, you got some time for, right? I mean, you can kind of tell, the meteorologists are seeing what's going on in the ocean, the heat patterns, the different tides and everything else. They can start to see when these things are developing.
Well, satellite images are probably the most powerful way they know what's happening.
Well, yeah, because now they can actually see it from space.
Yes, that's
They
right.
see it start to come in. They can kind of start to pinpoint the trajectory and where they expect it to hit land. And so, but again, like you said, it's the foresight, because I think one of the things that sometimes people misinterpret is that we're supposed to become like fortune tellers.
Right.
We're supposed to just know what it is, which is literally impossible for anybody to know exactly, right? So even
That's right.
with the hurricane, they don't know exactly where it's going to hit land until it hits land.
That's right.
The closer,
and there's not anything, by the way, I don't mean to imply at all that I think there's anything you can do about a risk like that. The thing you want to be sure of, though, is that you're prepared.
Yeah.
I've lived through a few of them here, and I can tell you it usually takes me 2 or 3 days to get everything battened down, to get the shutters up and do all those things. So the reason I would personally be concerned about the risk is to give myself time to be prepared, to make sure I have a plan. And that's where I think internal auditors can be of great value to management. And this is what I've been preaching now for several years, is if we do have that ability to help management and help our companies, our organizations look further out toward the horizon. It's not to prevent everything, because there's some things that are not preventable. It's to make sure that there is a plan for preparation. Is there a disaster recovery plan, a business continuity plan? Do you have in place the kinds of plans and controls that will allow you to minimize the impact?
Yeah, because like you said, you have to be prepared. And again, with the early warning signs, a couple days in advance, you can batten down your house, you can get out of town, right? Because it's probably coming, you're already prepared, you have a plan for it, and you've gone through this before, right? And
That's
so
right.
that's more kind of what the foresight is asking the kind of questions like, hey, Richard, did you know you live, on the east coast of Florida? Did you realize there's hurricanes, right?
But
So
the
if I was
likelihood
asking you,
in risk management language, the likelihood is higher,
it's higher.
and the impact is probably higher than when I live further inland over in Orlando. The likelihood of having, category 3 winds there is lower, and the impact is lower. So, you have to think in these traditional terms of, impact, likelihood, velocity. So I think these are things that internal auditors should keep in mind. I mean, the number one, Jason, over the years, people always say, well, what should we audit? What should we audit? And I have a very simple answer for that. 3 words: follow the risk. And if the answer is follow the risk, you're not going to do that very effectively if all you're doing is looking behind. Risk tends to lie further out. By the way, I'm also very mindful that, that we also should be thinking in terms of opportunity. That's very much what Agents of Change, the book, is about, is that I define change agents, internal audit change agents in the book, as those internal auditors who are catalysts for transformational change that enhance value for the organization. So that's not just going around and locking doors, making sure doors are locked and locking doors. Maybe that's helping the company or the organization identify where there should be new doors. It's not about using another cliche. It's not about being a bean counter or even knowing how the beans are grown or harvested or taken to market. It's maybe about saying, hey, should we be even growing beans at all? Maybe there's other crops that we ought to be thinking about. So it's really thinking transformationally about how you as an internal auditor bring value to the organization.
Well, and I think that's a great point, because, traditionally, in risk management, in audit, in compliance, and these kind of functions, even legal. It's more about loss prevention, right? Is kind of the idea, or value preservation. We're trying to hold on to whatever we've already created versus, value creation, this opportunity side of it, that often usually has a much bigger risk. You bring up the point about, should we be growing beans? Well, I come from a family of farmers, right? My ancestors were farmers, and in fact, one of my uncles was a very successful farmer. Why was he successful? Because when everybody else in the coffee shop was talking about planting corn, and he goes, everybody's going to be planting corn, which means that there's going to be a lot of supply of corn. What if I grow mint this year instead? And so he would zig when everybody else was zagging, and he did very, very well for himself because he was looking at that opportunity. That's again, I mean, to me, one of those things that we've got to start looking at or thinking about different is exactly that. What are those opportunities? Not to just be completely concerned with value preservation, but with value growth, with the opportunity side of it as well. And that lines up better with what management's looking for anyway. That's what they're more concerned about anyway, too. So
absolutely. In fact, in the book, we talk about what are the characteristics of the great change agents in our profession. And number one, and we heard back from over 600 chief audit executives around the world when we did a survey at the outset of the project. And the overwhelming response was business acumen. Business acumen in a general sense, really having a keen understanding of the concepts and principles of business operations, but also knowing your business, knowing the company and the industry that you serve. I would tell you, Jason, the number one complaint I've heard over the last 10 or 15 years about internal audit, if I'm probing with management or board members, is they're generally complimentary. And believe me, I think we have their ear in many more instances than not. But the most common refrain is, however, that they're great. They're great at what they do. They're really helpful to the company. However, I just wish they understood the business a little better. Mm-hmm. And so to me, the really successful internal audit change agents out there really live and breathe the business. Because if you're going to help the business change for the better, you better understand the fundamentals.
Yeah. Well, I think that's a good point, because it reminds me, one of my positions was with Arthur Andersen back in the day, and we changed, in the industry, really kind of, there were a couple of the firms, Andersen was one of them, that kind of changed how they were looking at financial statements and came up with what we called at the time the business audit. Okay. The very first step of that was understand the business. And we would spend a significant amount of our audit project time trying to understand the business. And, when I was younger in my career, I could never kind of understand that, right? It's like, well, we do this or we do that, right? I understand the business. I understand the business we're in, but do I really understand the business and those things that drive it? What are those internal and external things that really do drive the organization that you happen to be in, right? Everybody who's listening. And the more that we understand that business acumen, sounds like that's what your executives want you to know. So, okay, we're already expert in auditing. Now let's actually understand how the business works. That's why I think too, some of the best chief audit executives that I've seen or that I've worked with are those people that actually have moved around into different roles, or people that get other hats that they wear. I like to use that because I like to wear hats anywhere, right? But they're responsible for compliance, or they're responsible for risk management, or they've done other things in their career. It gives them more of that business acumen. It gives them, it becomes a more rounded person, so they can have those discussions with the executives much more intelligently, because they actually get it. They get it. right?
Absolutely. The other three big characteristics that we dive into in the book is that, the change agents in our profession are strategic, they are relationship centric, and they're innovative. So if you think about that, those are four very, very broad skills, attributes, whatever term you want to use. They tend to, that great change agents in our profession tend to share those in common. And that's what I think enables them to be the agents of change that they can become in their organization.
Yeah. Well, and those are four areas: business acumen, thinking more strategically, the relationship centric, and being innovative. Those are not four words that you would typically associate with internal auditing or with auditors in general.
Well, certainly not historically.
Right.
Let me hasten to add that I think we are a profession that continues to evolve, and that the skills that are out there today are quite impressive. And in many organizations, you do have people who have a combination, or in some instances, all of those characteristics. And that's why I think internal audit is adding more and more value. We've really seen a shift in the way internal audit is being championed in these last few years. And you saw it in the 3 lines paper that the IA just produced last year. You see it in the IA's 2030 strategic vision. This idea that we're a profession that's moving from the value protection era to a value enhancement era. And I think you can't really expect to enhance value as much without bringing a lot of those skills that we were just talking about to the table.
Very true. Well, and again, it's, like you said, some of the people, again, that are the most successful now, they're already adopting and already doing some of these four things. And this is probably too where there's some perception issues. I think one of your blogs was something about recently was about the perceptions that audit has to get past, right? For people to start seeing. And I think some of these are some of those perceptions, right? They see us, I think, well, you're going to remember better, but they see us as bean counters or accountants.
Right. It's the title was something to the effect that the enduring myths about internal audit cloud the awareness.
Yeah.
Because May was Internal Audit Awareness Month, and so it was really just sort of saying we can do a lot of things to create greater awareness about who we are and what we do, but we also need to keep in mind that there are misperceptions or myths out there that will persist, and we have to constantly work to overcome those.
Well, and there's 4 areas, right, that again, we can start overcoming some of those myths and misperceptions is, well, beef up on your business acumen. Start showing people that you actually understand, or, even take an interest in some of the stuff. I mean, one of the two of the best days of my audit career was hanging out with one of our plant managers. Okay. And this was for me to understand the business better. I went through high school, undergrad and graduate degrees in college with never taking chemistry. And then one of our largest divisions was a chemical fertilizer plant, right? So I've got all the number, but sitting down with him and having him take me for 2 days, shadowing him, explaining what's going on, sitting down, showing me the chemical reactions that were happening in the plant and what we were doing with it and why it is. That's the kind of stuff, we can all do that. So get more of that business acumen, start showing it to people, right? The strategic, again, start thinking more strategic, right? Have you read the strategic plan of your company? Hopefully, right? But I'm sure there's probably some people listening who haven't.
And do you even have a strategic plan for internal audit? Because, a lot of people think long-term planning for internal audit is through December. And the reality is December, that's fine. That's going to deal with this year's risks. But, what's your company going to be doing? Are you, is it going to be expanding globally? Is it going to be taking on new lines of service? And do you have the skills in internal audit to be able to help or to even be able to provide assurance? And the reality is every organization that I ever served as chief audit executive for, I took the organization through a strategic planning exercise almost at the outset of taking on the role, because it put us all on the same page. It also helped everybody to understand, what the risks and opportunities that lie ahead really are.
Mhm. Well, it is. And then, the last two as well that you can start working on is relationship centric, right? So I know, again, a lot of times we're very transactional in our nature. I got to get through the project. I got to do this. I got to do that. But spending that little extra time of actually developing and deepening the relationships is going to go a long way, right?
Building and sustaining relationships based on trust is one of the most valuable things you can do for yourself as an internal auditor. I observed in my book, Trusted Advisors, that, if you can be the smartest person in the organization, you can absolutely have all the expertise in the world, but if you're not a well-respected or liked individual, because you're kind of withdrawn and you're very distant and aloof, they'll invite you. Well, if you have all of the relationship skills, but you don't have any expertise, they'll invite you to dinner, but they won't invite you to give advice. So you really got to have it both. You've got to be strong in relationships and strong in expertise if you really want to become the trusted advisor or even the agent of change, which is kind of that next elevation above.
Yeah. This is great information, as far as kind of where we're going and trying to, again, move from that value protection to value enhancement and
Right.
some of the things that we just need to start kind of working on, to move the profession forward, continue, because like you said, we've been evolving the whole time. We're going to continue to evolve. So keep evolving with it, right? It's been a fun journey so far. It's served you well for 46 years, right?
Well, I've certainly seen a lot of change. I was observing to someone the other day, when I look at, internal audit, there are a lot of things that we haven't really grown a lot in. A lot of our processes and how you plan and conduct audits. I mean, a lot of that is still very, very much like it was 40 some years ago. And I think that's something we have to work on. That's why I'm such a big fan of some of the agile auditing methodology. But when it comes to technology, I feel like I've seen an absolute sea change out there. I told somebody the other day, when I became an internal auditor in 1975, the most sophisticated technology in the audit department was the 10-key calculator.
Did we use those?
Absolutely. I mean, that was still a good 10 years before you would see desktops on computers. I mean, we were really using the old spreadsheets. I came in kind of at the end of one era and at the beginning of the other, but today's modern internal audit department is, I think, much more embraces technology much better. Uses different tools for helping to manage the internal audit department itself, to help manage or to observe risk in the organization, compliance and controls. So I think we have made a lot of progress there, but there's still work to be done. These are what I call, by the way, the capacity multipliers. In all likelihood, you've got more risk that you're trying to deal with today than ever. You've got more volatility in your company than you've ever had to deal with. And in all likelihood, you don't have a whole lot more staff. You've probably got the same, or in most cases, or many cases, smaller staffs than you did 2 years ago before the pandemic. And so what you've got to look for is what's the edge that's going to allow you to increase internal audit's capacity to address risks and control issues in the organization without getting extra people. And that's where you get the term capacity multipliers. And technology is perhaps the most obvious capacity multiplier, but there are a lot of things we can do every day in the way we do our work that enhances our capacity.
Well, it does very much. Very good wisdom. Well, I wanted to just got a couple minutes here left, and I wanted to kind of go a little bit of a different direction, if you're okay with that, because I know, like you said, you've had an amazing career. You've been on the stage, you've written the books, people know you for all your technical stuff. but they probably don't know Richard as a person. so, so if you'll indulge me here a little
Sure.
bit, let's just get to know you a little bit better, just kind of in a quick thing, because I think the more that people, and this kind of goes back to the relationship centric stuff too, right? Is the more that we
Right.
actually get to know people as people, the more we see them as people, the more that we develop the relationships as well, right? So I'm a big music guy, so here we go. Here's a couple of music questions, right? So if I throw three band names out there for you, which one is your favorite, or of the groups? Are you a Beatles kind of guy, a Stones kind of guy, or more of a Bob Dylan kind of person?
It isn't close. It's always been Beatles.
It's always been Beatles for you? Okay.
Always been Beatles, and more specifically Paul McCartney. I mean, going back, first record I ever bought, I was 15 years old, and he was I think it was the single "Hey Jude." He was taking the lead on vocals, and I thought, this is really cool. And so I've had the opportunity over the years to see him in concert a few times. Last time I saw him in concert, I was sitting third row center.
Oh,
That
wow.
was like about 6 or 7 years ago. And it's almost like you if you have that kind of seat at a concert, particularly with an icon like that, it's almost like if you fly business class, it's hard to go back. So I've had a chance to attend his concerts a couple of times since then, but I can't quite bring myself to do it unless I'm going to be able to. And that particular package came with getting in to see the sound check before the concert that night. Oh, it was truly great experience for me. But Beatles, Paul McCartney, absolutely.
Well, and it's good. One of the reasons I asked that too is, for me, from a music revolution standpoint, we were talking about agents of change. Those three, right? The Beatles, the Stones, and Bob Dylan. All three of those, groups, artists had a huge, huge impact on the change of music. And what was interesting is they fed off of each other too, right?
Right.
So Dylan was inspired by the Beatles, and the Beatles were inspired by Dylan, and the Stones. It was like this big thing that they were all innovative, right, and kind of went through that. So okay, so that's one side of Richard that people probably didn't know. Now I know Beatles and specifically Paul, because usually when people say Beatles, and it's like, okay, who's your favorite Beatles? So you gave me that second answer already. So what about sports interest you? Football?
Oh, absolutely.
Basketball?
Anybody who knows me knows that I live and breathe Alabama Crimson Tide. In fact, you can see over my shoulder.
I can see over the shoulder. Okay.
Yeah, that's I think that's my wife and I at the end of the 2015 national championship game when we beat Clemson. Because I've been the natural inclination when people hear that I'm an Alabama fan is, he's jumped on that train in the last 10 or 15 years. I've been an Alabama fan since Bear Bryant's era in the 1970s. Yeah. I've been through thick and thin, but I'll tell you, there's been no mountain like the last 12 years. We've been able, my wife and I have been able to go to, I think, 7 or 8 national championship games. We won 6 of them over the years. It's truly a great time to be an Alabama Crimson Tide fan. And I'm very excited about the success they've had.
Well, that's good. That's another thing. And you can tell a true fan if you stay a true fan, whether they're winning or not, right? So it's like,
I remember in the year 2000, I think we won 3 games, and you don't give up. You say, I'm still with you. And now, it's just most teams, if they could have one golden era, they're really their fans are in heaven. I've been fortunate enough to live through 2 real golden eras of Alabama football.
Yeah. Well, I'm a USC grad, so we've had several of those. We've been in the slumps for the last little while, but yeah, the 2000s were a great run for us, and I'm looking forward to the next run when we're playing Alabama in the national championship.
We were supposed to play last year, and then the pandemic came along. But my good friend Kiko Harvey is the new chief audit executive over at USC. Yep. And I know she is another tried and true fan of the Trojan.
Fight on, right? Okay, so so last of these kind of questions, then we'll kind of wrap up with a final question. But again, I mean, I learned now too. I didn't realize that you'd moved to the coast as well, right? So
Yeah.
obviously the ocean, great place. East coast of Florida is an amazing place. What kind of stuff do you enjoy doing, hobby wise or other stuff outside of? I mean, I know you love giving to the profession, but
Right.
what are some other things maybe that you do that people wouldn't know about you?
Well, certainly we're and when I say we, my wife and I are partners now for more than 30 years, and we love to travel, love to get out and see the world and meet internal auditors and meet other people from around the world. Probably my favorite place to go is Africa, because I really enjoy getting there and meeting the professionals and getting to know people and seeing the wildlife and taking in the safari tours. We've done that a few times. As far as my, because obviously the pandemic has kind of clipped our wings for the last few months.
For that
Although we're getting ready to sprout our wings again, and hopefully between now and the end of the year, we're going to make a couple of international trips. But I would tell you that being here on the beach has been truly sort of transformational for me. A lot of people say, well, what made you decide to step down from the eye? I mean, 12 years, I think, is a long time. It's long enough, but I could have stayed longer. I had longer left on my contract, but I got out there during the early days of the pandemic, and I found myself walking the beach. And of course, there was nobody else around, and really a chance to reflect. And that's when I sort of said, really enjoyed this. There's no pinnacle that I'll ever reach that's higher than this, but it's time for somebody else to come and take the leadership reins, and for the organization to be exposed to new leadership and new ideas. So I use that opportunity to do that, but I still find myself, I've already today been out there and done my daily walk on the beach. It's a great time to get out there and reflect, and I'm enamored with the wildlife that we have here along the beach, the pelicans and all of the other wildlife we have. The sun rises in the morning. I see the sunset. I'm on an island, so I see the sunset to the west in the evening. So this is a great way to spend the golden years when I'm not in here doing interviews like this.
Well, that's good. No, and I'm just on the other side. We're California coast. For me, we're a couple miles away from the beach, but it's that's one of our favorite places for my wife.
I was there last month. We were there in Huntington Beach.
Okay.
So it was really cool to be able to stay there in the hotel and watch the sunset, because I get to see it rise here. So I finally got a chance to watch it set for us.
Yeah, because there's some great resorts right there, because we're actually just up. We're in technically Long Beach, but we usually head down to Seal Beach, which is the next pier up from Huntington.
I made the trek from Huntington Beach up to El Segundo and over to El Cerritos. So I feel almost like that area is now my second home.
Okay.
Audit board is based in that area, so I expect I'll get back there more often.
Yeah, they are. They're 2 miles from my house technically. So anyway, yeah, I'm sure you'll be back. So let me know when you're out here. We'll hang out.
I'll do it.
All right. So maybe just final one question that I like to ask a lot of guests too is, you're 46 years into your career. If you could...
I'll bet you don't say that to many of your guests.
No, I don't. Most of them are like 46. I can't count that high. What are you talking about?
That's right.
But if you could go back, right, to that young teenager who was just getting started, and you had a piece of advice for young Richard, right, what would you tell to young Richard? Because a lot of people that are, in their early 20s, just starting the profession, probably would be applicable advice for them as well. So what would you tell your young self as you were getting started again?
Well, I think soak it all in. When you're young, sometime you find yourself, trying to be very competitive, trying to get that leg up, get that extra stride in front of somebody else for the next promotion and all. And my it's cliche, but a career is it's a marathon. It's not a sprint. Don't torture yourself if you don't get the promotion you thought you were going to get, or if somehow you didn't get recognized for a project that you thought you did a great job. Just step back and say, you know what, everything happens for a reason. And I'm going to use this as an opportunity to get better and stronger for the future. I think too much, I think we spend too much time in life and in our careers sort of stressing about things that 30 years, 40 years later won't be important at all.
Well, exactly. That's a great way to actually end and bring in a quote from my favorite Beatle, John, which is, life is what happens to you when you're busy making other plans.
Absolutely.
And, that's exactly the thing. Enjoy the ride, soak it in, and realize that joy is in the journey, not necessarily in the destination. So enjoy where you're at. So
absolutely.
Great advice, Richard. Thanks for taking the time for me and for coming on today. I really appreciate it, man.
Thank you. Thanks, Jason. Thanks for having me.
You're welcome.
And that's a wrap. Thanks for listening to today's episode of Jamming with Jason. Keep on rocking in the audit world, and if you enjoyed this episode, please share with your friends and leave us a review on your favorite podcast platform. Connect with me on LinkedIn and let me know what you enjoyed the most about the podcast, and you may even be featured on a future episode. When you're ready to turbocharge your leadership development, join the Briefing Leadership Program, where you get access to everything in one place and can interact directly with me in the group. If you'd like to earn continuing professional education for listening to today's episode, head on over to C-Risk Academy's video on-demand learning platform at ondemand.criskacademy.com. Not only do you get a CPE certificate, but you will also have access to hundreds of video on-demand learning opportunities. The views and opinions expressed on this podcast are that of the individuals and not of their respective organizations.